This interview does a great job of talking about what it's like to actively work on a relationship. I think that nowadays a lot of people think that a relationship should be effortless, and that if there are problems that you have to work on within the dynamic of a relationship, it means that the relationship isn't right. And I think that it leads to a lot of problems in relationship because what happens is you don't talk about that stuff and then it builds up over time. And so, by instead actively working on the dynamic of your relationship, like you love your partner, you're happy with your partner, but you also actively work on the dynamic to make it better and better, I think it allows relationships to really blossom and flourish. And the second thing is that I also think that it does a really good job of highlighting that not all of your needs need to be met by your significant other. That if your significant other is not as good at talking about problems, for instance, that you can vent and talk about problems with your friends or your family, and that you can get those needs met in other places rather than all of that responsibility being on your partner's shoulders. So I hope you enjoy the interview, and here we go. So how are you doing? It's been a while since we last talked.
It has been a while. Been okay. I mean, the usual. Well, I don't know if it's the usual insanity, but like, what was it? You already know with the husband getting fired for in violation of the FMLA, which he doesn't want to fight, but to each their own. Still working the same job. Still surviving, and I mean, other than that, it's stressful for the lack of job, but at least we're not going destitute. We're breaking even, so there's that. But other than that stressor, life is pretty much the same, really.
It sounds really stressful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was actually kind of funny. Well, to me, I think I chose to find it funny, but my mother even said like, "What was it? Your stress just keeps going up. Like that's not fair." I'm like, "No, it's not." But what other choice is there? Like, just keep going forward.
How do you deal with that? Like how do you handle that?
Uh, you know, I think it makes it easier in my mind to compare it to the what I've already experienced in terms of the highest amount of stress that I have ever been under for like a sustained amount of time was again with my husband nearly dying in the car accident, and
Hmm.
and then also getting the job here on this side of the country, within 24 hours and being released from the hospital, and then packing and doing all that, and it's just like that was the most stressful period of my life. So to like, yes, this is stressful, but it's not as bad. So it's almost kind of like talking to myself and having that that misery loves company sort of situation, but mentally like, oh yeah, well misery was a lot worse then, so it's not as bad. Then of course, I do have a what is it, being able to talk openly with my husband also definitely helps.
Hmm.
Um, we do, let's say for me, I have no problems, just talking and, saying I feel this or this upset me or this made me happy, etc., etc. I have no problems with that. My husband doesn't. He grew up in a just recap on that one was abusive household, so he often just more used sleep to escape and was taught to not say anything. Let me put my phone on vibrate. Um, so to get him to open up is always takes a lot longer, and so setting up a structured time makes it a little bit easier for him to try to, like, okay, I know at 7 p.m. on Thursday that hey, this is our time to talk. And even then he still won't. It's like it's always will be me first, and then to say, well, how do you feel, and like, well, you seemed like you reacted this way earlier in the week and blah blah blah, did you? And honestly, the answer every single time, I hate it, is like, that's that's not an answer. Like, just tell me, like, even if you tell me to go fuck off, that's an answer. That's fine, but please don't shrug because I have no idea what that means.
Yeah. Just gives you like
Uh,
nothing to work with.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Uh, but slowly getting better with that. But I mean, like, yesterday was really difficult. Was and because what was it? I was heading into work. This is why I was up for 24 well, I was up for like 24 hours and 20 something minutes, I think it was, when I finally, like, when I last looked at the time, and I know, like, I passed out finally. But I woke up a little bit late, but it wasn't too bad. Headed to work. I was going slow the entire time, stuck behind somebody, but my exit was coming up. So I finally went around and I passed somebody, and at the height of me passing, there's a cop there, and I'm like, and I get pulled over. And so it's the first ticket I have ever received. I've never even gotten a parking ticket before, because I'm normally am like, okay, I have been in a compliance role. So for like so long that it's like I try very, very hard to be like, oh, the person in charge of compliance is incompliant. So I I was so annoyed. And then the other thing is that because I was passing somebody, I was doing over 15 miles over the speed limit. Or I was doing 67 and a 45, which I have no, like, my car has pick up and go. I had no idea it was going that fast. And so because of that, that now turns into a mandatory court appearance. Like, okay. So I get into work, and then immediately, by the way, I'm not even supposed to go in physically on Fridays. I work from home on Fridays, and I had to go in on Friday because there was an event. It's called Give Kids a Smile, where it's actually as many kids as possible are provided with free healthcare. And we're just kind of keep rotating them out. It's high stress and everything, but and especially working with kids, you got to have that high energy. And so it's like coming into that, and then we were able to serve like over 900 kids in a day.
Wow.
So it was just like, by the end of the day, I was like, I am mentally and emotionally dead. Like,
Hmm.
I'm done. So what was it? I met up with a friend and was like kind of chilling. I was like, okay. Came on back, ate dinner, was in the bath for like half an hour, and then her friend was like, I just got a bottle of whiskey. He's like, do you want to drink some? I was like, sure. Like, not success, please, because I still got shit to do tomorrow. But we were just talking and cathartic and everything, and then the next thing I know, it's like 3 a.m. I'm like, I should probably go home because I was awake. My alarm goes off at 3:30 in the morning. So by the time I got home and actually brushed teeth, all the and everything else, it was like a little after 4, and then yeah, so I was like, So yeah, that is not the normal though. But that was just more kind of like, okay, this is as I was telling my husband, it's like the reason for such a if I thought about it too much, I was going to cry because it was just, my stress levels are at like a constant higher than normal, and then it's like first time ever getting a ticket, and then all these kids, it's just like, if I think about anything other than what's immediately in front of me, the next step, like, I'm just gonna cry.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was definitely not a fun one.
No, yeah. So I think that I heard a few different things from what you said. So the first thing is in terms of like how you deal with just life constantly hitting you, is that like this kind of ain't shit compared to what you've been through.
Yep, yeah.
The second thing that I heard is that it helps to talk about it, whether
Yes.
it's with your partner or with a friend or like whatever. Like it's really helpful just to be able to like vent it out. And
Yeah.
then the final thing that I heard is that with your husband, it is difficult to get him to talk about stuff. And so, one thing that helps with that is structured time to talk. And it sounds
Yes.
like it is still a little bit of a battle, but the sort of like scheduled time for self reflection definitely helps.
Yes. Absolutely.
And then I think that, yeah, that was such a great example of how stressful your life is on sort of a
Yeah.
constant basis. And you said this thing about like, if I think about it, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
And so then like once you get through it, do you cry or like what happens after?
I think the being able to discuss it like you said,
Hmm.
and for me like getting it out into the universe, so to speak, allows it to no longer have a residence in my mind,
Hmm.
or at the very least not be at the forefront of my mind.
Sure. So like,
uh
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say, so it's just it just makes life a lot easier, or where it's not gonna be a constant thing in my mind, and it might not be that fast of a turnaround time. There were other times that I can think of, actually another one that comes up to mind, but I'll go to that one in a minute. But stick on topic here at least is yeah, just being able to get it out, and to even if it's just what is it, do you need me to listen to and to acknowledge what's going on? Do you need me to give advice, or would it feel good to just be, to actively engage and like, oh, I can't believe that, or whatever a way to succinctly say that, like those three areas. um that's often what'll it'll come down to. And
Y-
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I'm hearing you describe some cool things. So um, the first thing that I heard you describe is that when you experience that feeling of like, I can't think about this right now because if I do, like, I'm gonna cry. Then what happens, it sounds like usually, is that at a certain point you will, after you sort of get out of the fray, you will go and
Mm.
talk with someone about it, and that helps to sort of like dissipate the energy.
Yep.
And then the other thing that I heard you talk about is when you talk to somebody, you make sort of an intentional effort to like let them know, or like if you're helping somebody, either way, to sort of like check in about what either you need or what they need in that conversation. Is it like, okay, like, do you like, I just need to vent, or I really need help solving this problem, or I really need somebody to like understand what I'm going through right now because it's really tough.
That's it exactly. To ask that, and to I'll normally, at least with my husband, predicate that of like, I just I just need to say this out loud, and then it's like, okay, once I get out, then I'm gonna feel better. So it's just kind of like, it feels weird. It's almost kind of like, asking him to take on the more like trying to get vent all the emotions, almost like, for at least with my husband's side, it was like to a wall. Because if I say like, oh, I just want you to be there for me to say it, like he will be there, and it's not like he's just completely ignoring me. But again, because he can often just be very stoic, since again that's what he's always learned, like you can't show much emotion, otherwise you get beaten. So you know but another thing, actually, I realized yesterday too, when I was with that friend, well, the second friend, because I saw one right after work, and then the one that invited me for the whiskey. um uh, he was also venting, because what was it, uh he he's a doctor, and he's obviously venting about some other stuff. But one thing I realized too was like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I remember like it it was always encouraged to speak your emotions. I mean, I remember like a couple times, even when I was a little kid, where you can't really process your emotions. So I remember like being in a hug by once by my mom, once by my dad. I know it happened more than once, but like that's all that comes to mind. And just like probably blathering on to like, but it's like, at least I know, being an adult now, I'm like, okay, that's kind of nice. Like, even just being present there, listening and acknowledging that you're saying something, it's like, okay, that just makes it feel really good. And so that's at least how it makes it easier, at least in my adult brain, to be able to just say it, okay, and now I can move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so as we're talking about this, I'm noticing something pop up, and it may be a topic that you don't want to talk about, and that's totally fine if not. But I just want to offer it up and see if you want to go down that road or if you want to go down a different road.
Sure.
Um, as you've been talking, I've noticed that, like, as someone that gets a lot from talking with people, it sounds like it's really hard with your husband because, when you try to get him to open up, he's sort of, and
Yeah.
when you sort of ask him to be there for you, it's like he is there technically, but it sort of feels like talking to a brick wall.
I mean, I have no problem discussing it,
Okay.
or working through it, or what have you. I think that for me, I can say that yes, it does make it difficult more quite often if he doesn't actively engage. But I think what it comes down to as well is that he has gotten a heck of a lot better from when we first started dating to current. And yes, it is still a struggle. So it is just that the communication styles are completely different, and that I've learned, at least with him, from being together as long as we have, that he isn't hiding or ignoring. Because I've learned my biggest pet peeve is not being acknowledged. Not, and that can be, can send to a lot of things, either to things I do, or that I did, or my, or dismissing my feelings, that sort of thing. um so that is my biggest pet peeve, and that was towards the that was quite often the beginning of the relationship, until establishing that he wasn't dismissing, it's just that he doesn't know how to process emotions in a healthy and appropriate way. Well, appropriate makes it sound like he's going to get angry, but as in, like, he doesn't know how to express it. And it can be frustrating, but again, with having these structured check-ins, it it's gotten better to the point of where, like, when we first started dating, it wasn't even a shrug. It was like a deer in headlights panic. And, like, I can't even look at you. And it was like, oh damn. So, like, obviously that was, took a bit to come back from. But now at least it's oh hey, it's check-in time. How are you feeling? And then it's just normally again, the shrug. I'm like, okay, I know. I always let you go first because, like, I know it's gonna be a shrug, but maybe there's something. And then I'll talk and everything, and then I'll be like, oh, and then this one time it looked like you were angry. Were you angry? And then he'll, I know to just let him be. It's going to take him a little bit of time to process his response. And then he'll process the response and he'll respond and say, I wasn't mad. It was XYZ, or I was happy because XYZ, whatever, what have you. And so I think, like, doing that has made it a lot easier. I would love it if he'd be able to bring it up on his own instead of me being cognizant of something that of his emotional his current emotional state. Um, but again, it's leaps and bounds from deer in headlights. So I think that's what it is for me. Is just that knowing that yes, our communication styles are completely different, but he's at least trying, and he is improving, and we do communicate. So there's at least that.
Yeah, totally. I really get that sort of dynamic that when you're in a relationship, like, inevitably there are going to be things that are not perfect. And one, like, really good sign is like, okay, like, this may not be ideal, but I can see that it is steadily improving. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like, worthwhile to, like, keep working on it and stick it out and all that sort of stuff. um I'm curious about, so how do you balance that with getting your needs met? Does that question make sense?
I to get my emotional needs met. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah. So like in this particular case, uh it sounds like there's a need that you have to like feel heard and like feel understood and maybe even a little bit validated, like all that sort of stuff to vent the emotional energy, all that sort of stuff. How do you balance like, uh, being with your partner and sort of like being along for that journey with your partner while also making sure that like you're getting your own needs met of like, okay, like, I'm still being heard, I'm still able to like speak my feelings and be understood and all that sort of thing.
For such a long pause is I don't know. Um, it's not necessarily going to be a satisfying answer in terms of that, but I'm not really too sure since um, it is just something I've always done. I think what helps is probably having probably having friends that are better at communicating their emotional needs. And I mean, like that friend yesterday with the again with the whiskey. The reason why again it was a cathartic hours long hangout because of just talking about how we felt. Um, so I think that absolutely helps. Um, and I think if something is bothering me, still knowing that I can talk to my husband about it and I still can have that ability to say how I feel and to see how he feels uh um it doesn't have to only be a Thursday because the thing is that yes, Thursday is set, but if something is bothering me, I don't like I'm not gonna wait till Thursday. If something's bothering me, I'm gonna discuss it. Um, and it doesn't even have to be him involved. It could be again something from work. But I guess a mixture of the schedule time, still being able to discuss it whenever I feel I need to, and to intermittently have a cathartic bitch sesh with friends,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
lack of a better term.
yeah. So I heard a couple of cool things there. I guess first, before I sort of like echo them back to you, I just want to check in and sort of make sure like in terms of that question of like how do you get your emotional needs met, like do you feel like you're getting your needs met?
Mm, sometimes no, more often than not, yes. But again, that what makes it, I think, easier for me is the fact that if I don't feel that I'm having my emotional needs met, I can say I can flat out just say I feel like my emotional needs are not being met because XYZ. What are your thoughts? Do you feel that that's fair? Do you feel that maybe I'm over reaching or whatever whatever your side of it is, to at least engage in a discussion. And then just I would love. I mean, the difference, of course, is with a friend that is better to communicate, in that I I can get a pretty quick answer in comparison to my husband. That like I know that the more complex it gets, the more time I have to expect to provide him to allow him to reach there. So it's like if my emotional needs are not being met and I bring it up, then it's like I know that like okay, he's really thinking about it, but it's probably going to be like a solid 5 minutes of just silence. And it's not fun, but I know that at least in the end, it's he's working towards an answer. So
Gotcha. Yeah, it sounds really
If
hard,
that,
dude. Because so
yeah.
just to echo what I've heard so far, so it sounds like you do have some good ways of going about it in terms of like, um, even though it may be hard to navigate those situations with him, I can still talk with him about it. And if I am feeling like my emotional needs are not being met, I can still like I can say that to him. I can say like, "Hey, I feel like my emotional needs aren't being met." And it seems like the tricky part about that is that like if you feel like your emotional needs aren't being met, and then you have to like go mining in like
Uh,
the trenches that are like your husband's walls in order to like get those emotional needs met, that seems tough. But the last thing that I hear is that like I do have friends that help to fill that role, that like if I'm really having a hard time, really not feeling like my emotional needs are met, and I don't have the sort of like emotional bandwidth to go mining, then I can go to one of my friends and they can help me to process that. So then I can go to my husband and be like, okay, feeling a little bit better, have a little bit more bandwidth. Let's talk through this.
that is exactly why I saw one friend like I went straight from work to my friend's house, came home to he was like, okay, I can talk a little bit, but like let me go for a, eat because I haven't eaten, then a bath, and then it was like, oh hey, another friend that is also able to like okay discuss. So okay, so I mean like my husband and I we still haven't even really fully discussed everything that I even was feeling and experiencing yesterday, but I'm like, how you went to sleep like around midnight. I didn't go to sleep until 4 and I was still up at like 8:30 this morning. And I'm like and he didn't get up until 11. I'm like, "My god, dude. I don't know how you can sleep that much." But I was like, I'm afraid that if I which is also why it's like taking me longer to process my my own words comparison to what it would probably normally be. Just more cuz I staying up that late, I don't want to like sleep in too late and then not go to bed until very late again. So, suffer today and be better tomorrow.
Sure, sure. When you work so hard and stay up for 24 hours, you get like 4 hours of sleep, and you get up at 8:30 and you're continuing to work so hard and your husband is still sleeping. How does that make you feel?
Oh, that is definitely a pet peeve. And that's what was it? Now that he is uh let's see, finally awake and everything. I very briefly brought it up yesterday, and I plan on bringing it up actually more today. Of like, all right, I know that a lot of the chores and that sort of thing he's picked up because he is we know from like from certain time to certain time, Monday through Friday, he is looking at jobs or updating for because of unemployment here you have to keep a catalog and record of everything. You even have to like keep email confirmations. Like it's set up more for like still the old version of like writing paper resumes and like driving around places and just dropping off like cold calling resumes, which doesn't make sense in like the last 20 years. But so otherwise, you have to have a copy of the email. So then, like printing out emails and keeping that catalog together and everything. Um, so like working on that, and then if not, then you know, uh, going from there. Uh, but I did bring up to him like, hey, what are we need to sit down and make a list of what are all the things that are happening, like all the chores and everything, and a let's see, when are you gonna do them? Like set days, make a schedule. And but the thing is too is that okay, we're gonna if we set a schedule, it also makes it easier for me to also make plans and to go from around that. Um, and because especially with me and ADHD, I need lists, I need calendars, I need everything like this just to help mask it as best I can. And so doing that, it also I know will help me. So that was discussed very briefly. I just didn't have the bandwidth to fully go into it yesterday. So that's a today thing that I plan on going into. Like, okay, yeah, let's we need to discuss what everything is going on there, because otherwise, yeah, it does feel like I'm always doing something, and I choose to do it to work that way, just more because I don't. It is so difficult for me to try to relax, because then I feel there isn't another word other than just icky. Like they're not a if I'm not doing something, even something small, then it just I just don't feel good. Like I feel like something's wrong and that sort of thing. Until of course, then there's a certain point where every once in a while where I'm just like, I'm tired. Like I'm not doing anything. I don't care. But it doesn't happen that often. It's like maybe twice a year, if that.
Hmm. So I think that there's sort of two different paths that we could go in this conversation in my mind. Let me know if there's another one that you would prefer, but the two that are coming to mind for me are, one, in response to the question of, like, how do you feel when you've been up for 24 hours and get up at 8:30 and he's still sleeping. I heard, like, I can understand he has he is doing things and he does have responsibilities, and like, for it to feel almost like fair or balanced in the relationship, like, I really need him to have some kind of structure, because I need some kind of structure. And so if he doesn't have some kind of structure and we coexist, it's like everything just kind of goes to hell. Everything sort of falls apart. Like, I gotta have that. I gotta have that for my sake. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that we could talk a little bit more about that, and I could ask you some questions about that. The other thing that we could talk about is, you mentioned that if you try to relax, you feel icky. You're like, I can't think of how else to describe it. And we could talk about what icky is or means, or what's going on there. Which would you prefer to talk about?
So when you were listing it, I would kind of went eyes might have glazed over, and that was more because I was trying to see how I felt, and I felt more dread with the first one. So I think the first one would be better, because to explore why do I feel dread with that, or not
Yeah,
dread isn't the right word. It's more discomfort.
sure, sure. So
So I mean that'd be probably a good one to go for.
sounds good. Sounds good. So in terms of the discomfort that you were feeling, is there any specificity to that discomfort? Like, what kind of discomfort is it?
mm, it there I unfortunately can't give you a specific
Okay.
one. I can say that um like I wish I could see like a like a clip of like what was just last said, so I could try to like see if there was one area that peaked that
Yeah.
discomfort level than another. But all I know is that I felt just more discomfort, and to try to put it maybe into to try to potentially specify um I Yep. Okay. Because I started like picturing my mind, and I started to feel that same discomfort level. So I think what it could be down to is trying to set a trying to set a structure and a schedule for somebody else that is not my subordinate or my spouse, and trying to balance my needs, his needs, my um uh uh neuro spicy mind of just like trying to get to that, because he's neurotypical, so obviously that's like a just a difference in that, um and trying to think of ways to navigate through that, again with him not wanting to necessarily actively engage in discussions as much as I can or do, and without trying to basically balance his needs and my needs, and still coming out with one way, still coming out with something that doesn't make me feel that he is being bulldozed, or that his emotions and his feelings and everything else are not being bulldozed in a way to satisfy my satisfy me, essentially, but at the same time without giving up my own to the point. So I think that's what it is like that razor's edge, so to speak.
Yeah. It is it okay if I take a little bit of a shot in the dark here?
Yeah.
So as we're talking about this, the sort of um, emotion that comes to mind, like when I think about just like as like to sort of externalize the example, when I think about one person, like grinding for 24 hours and then like getting up in like 4 hours the next day, and then the other person is like sleeping in bed. The emotion that comes to mind there is like, oh, like that seems like a recipe for resentment. And I hear in what you're talking about the like action steps that you are taking to try to prevent that. That it's like, well, I don't want to resent my husband, so instead, like, I'm gonna have discussions with him and try to like work out a schedule with him. And what seems really tricky about all this is then you described like during the course of that discussion, I have to balance my needs, I have to balance his needs, I have to navigate our neuro differences, and I have to think about like not making him feel bulldozed. Like I can't like push too much, which like is all more work for you.
Pretty much it. And it's actually kind of funny. Because like something I don't know, to me at least in my mind, something similar was just actually discussed with my, okay, so Travis was the first friend and Nathan was the second friend. Was Whiskey, and so Travis is former flight attendant, now gone corporate, and so we were talking about how he loves being able to travel, and that he still is able to do that, even though that he's moving on the corporate. He still has like for another, I think, like 8 more years of um, free domestic traveling. Only has to pay taxes if he wants to go internationally. It's like, damn, like that's lovely. But the caveat is he has to always fly standby. And so for him, he's like, well, I'll just pack, a bag, and I'll, do always just do a carry on, and, just if I might not get out. And he's still telling a story about how it took him once like 3 days to be able to try to go out somewhere, and then he kind of gave up, and so he went to another place, but he was like flying to different airports and everything. And I'm like, dear God, no. I'm good. Like obviously, just this whole conversation we've been going over is like I need structure in order to keep me going, because it just nothing is gonna pique my anxiety more than constantly having to like adjust constantly. Um, but or at least for a sustained amount of time. And I told him, I said, well, to be fair, I don't necessarily think I'd have that much of a issue with that if it was just me. Because if it's I'm only responsible for me, and no one's gonna be picking me up, no one's going. I'm not waiting on it. Nobody else is waiting on me. Then it's like, okay, you know what? That actually doesn't sound too bad. Because hey, I will just take the next flight that takes me to that same area or to a completely different area. That's totally fine. But like I was saying, like, oh, seeing some videos on TikTok and Instagram Reels and everything else of like how, what was it, how a lot of or at least what I've seen with a wife saying, oh, for my birthday I don't want to do anything. And like I don't care what it is, I don't want to do anything, because then I always have to think about, where are we going, what are we doing, and it's like, oh well, yeah, what is it that you want to go to eat, or do you want to go over here, around what time would you like to go? Oh, can you send me a link for like some ideas that you would like for your birthday? And this is like, and what's too funny is like every time I see like different videos like that, I'm just like, that's me every single birthday. To my husband, I'm like, I don't care. Like I like literally, if we do absolutely nothing and you get me absolutely nothing, I would prefer that than having to plan something because like that is me every day. Is I'm not only worrying about my schedule, but then I also have your schedule, and then I have 384 doctoral student schedules that I'm and another 2,000 employees plus all these other things. And so I'm like, I am always scheduling and planning and doing logistics and always modifying. So it's just kind of like, I'd like a day of just not doing anything. So especially if it's like, going out like that and everything, if I'm not going to be responsible for anybody else other than myself, it's a lot easier because that, again, if I'm always juggling like literal thousands of people, I'm like, I'm kind of good with just doing my own thing and not having to worry about it. But just worrying about myself is easy. So I don't know
Yeah.
if that was a tangent, but that's kind of what brought to mind.
No, no, I don't think it was a tangent at all. I think that what I heard you describe is like, if I had to like adapt on the fly and like be flexible and it was just me, like I think I could do that. But I don't feel like I can do that when I'm carrying my husband on my back.
Yep.
And so like one of the best presents in the world for me is if my husband just lets me do nothing for a day. If I don't have to
Yep.
plan anything, if I don't have to think about anything, I can just exist and relax because I never get to do that. And I'm curious, what do you think would happen if, and this is not like a suggestion, this is a genuine question. What do you think would happen if you like some of the weight that you're carrying on your shoulders, if you gave some of that to your husband?
Doesn't get done.
Hmm.
We literally have 3 black marks on our credit that will be falling off soon because I let the car that he was primarily driving, that are both our names, take care of the car bill, and it was always late.
Hmm.
And there was always issues. Oh, it's because the bank. And I'm like, that's amazing since like I have no problems if I take over and pay the car bill for you. And then I take care of all the other bills. It was like that was literally the one bill I asked you to please just take care of. Take care of it yourself to see how it go. And we have 3 black marks on our credit now for the next 7 years. That'll be off in like another 3 years. And it's just like, it was also that was the vehicle that was the part of the car crash. So it was just kind of like, oh well, at least it's gone now. But it's just, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. And if I try to include more to a certain point, things that are really, really important, I can't. It's on me. It has to be on me. I don't like it. But there really hasn't. I mean, after 9 years, that is the one area that absolutely hasn't changed. So
How
I
do
don't know.
how do you feel about that?
Not exactly happy about it, but I also don't believe that it is a um what is the right term? I don't feel that it is a enough of an item, a deal breaker. There we go. Couldn't think of the word. It is not the deal breaker because I know that there are certain things that I do, not just for him, I just mean in general, that are, that are going to irritate people. And so far, and I think it is pretty much normal from just being human, is to focus on the negative. And I feel like that's all really done so far. But the fact is that in comparison to all the positives outweigh the negatives. Now, I don't know that objectively. I just know subjectively of how I feel that is that's there. So yes, I complain about it, and it is annoying, but not annoying to the point that I don't feel supported in other ways, and that it, the red flags don't outweigh the green flags.
Sure, yeah. And I mean ultimately like the subjective experience is all that matters, right? Cuz like it's your relationship. So um
Yeah.
I'm curious what are the what are some of the positives? What are the things that like make being with your husband a net positive?
Um, the little things. So my husband is horrible with talking, but he is absolutely wonderful with actions. You know, I not necessarily with that last action I gave you, in terms of like something that is going to be a schedule, or something like that, which I always found hysterical, well, or at least ironic. Of like, the neurotypical can't remember to pay a bill, but the neurodivergent can. All right. Um, but anyway, it is like yesterday, um, I came home from hanging out with a friend, and I was hungry, but he also didn't know what I wanted to eat, and he also doesn't know how to cook for my temporarily going vegan. So he what was it? He preheated the oven for me just in case I wanted to use it, which I did. So I was like, that worked out. So I came home, the oven was already preheated. All I had to literally do was pull out a meal from that I when I make something, you know, just um, uh, bulk make meals. And I hate that I'm struggling with words after, but you know, still brain fog from yesterday.
You're running on 4 hours of sleep after 24 being awake for 24 hours.
Yes, so it's I'm still surprised I'm here. So I'm like still at least here and trying to be cognizant
Totally.
of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's just meal prep. There we go. So I meal prep, and it's just easier this way if I'm, you know, like yesterday where I just don't have the energy or bandwidth to do it, then just to pop it in the oven. And then when I finished eating, before I had even finished eating, he drew me a bath, and you know, and got that stuff ready. And then other times, you know, if he sees something small, because for me, it's like I don't necessarily like, I don't like knickknacks, not because I don't find them to be enjoyable, but because if I don't have an area that I know I want to put it at, or especially, you know, if like for saying we're going shopping or something, and my it's like, oh, I really like this, like, oh, I think it's nice too. Where's it going? Like, where would you like to put it? Oh, well, we can find, no, where? And so that's always my mentality. So he knows not to get me knickknacks. But like another one was for, let's see, he got me he got me happy pills for work, and not actual pharmaceuticals. But there are these little pills, and they actually like have little like different smiley faces and everything on them, and they look like capsules. And inside them, he actually took rectangular pieces of paper and wrote little notes and things like, you know, like, I love you, you're doing great, like, and I love that I get to spend the rest of my life with you, like lots of little things. And when I say like a pill, I don't mean a bottle, I don't mean like this, I mean it's like a glass mason jar full of these capsules that he took like 3 weeks of writing and putting in there, and that sort of thing, as just as a surprise. So I mean, like things like that, where, you know, that is out, you know, those little actions where he knows that I'm struggling, and so if he knows that I'm struggling, then he helps in ways that he knows that will help me, um, in small and, you know, big ways too. And so that's another way, in terms of, while he might not be able to meet me conversationally for emotional needs, he meets my emotional needs in his actions.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like one of the big positives in your relationship with him is like little acts of service. He'll draw a bath, preheat the oven, make this like lovely little gift that just sort of, you know, like keeps you going throughout the day, has little like inspiring messages. Yeah, that sounds really lovely.
So I mean, that's definitely a positive, and absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And so then, in terms of what you said of like, if I don't do it, then it's not going to get done. And in our 9 years of being together, that is something that hasn't changed. Is that something that you believe can change, or do you think that it's the way that it is?
He's my old man. Like the old man is like, this is how I am, I'm not going to change. And it's because the thing is that I've learned with him is if something bothers me enough that I'm going to say, hey, this really bothers me, is this something you think you can work on, and that sort of thing. Like, he'll try, and then maybe just being human, you'll repeat it. But if you actively try, then that's awesome. But um, you know, it's just I've learned through trial and error, for things that are gonna have a big impact on life, i.e., a credit report or that sort of thing. I just know that I have to do it. But little stuff, that for sure has changed in terms of um, it over time has actually changed, and so that he will follow through, and I can rely on him to do that, or at the very least, know that sometimes it'll still be an issue. Like, honestly, the biggest, he will wash every single item in our house. He has no problem. Washer to dry it and air dry, and then to the dryer and everything, and then that's it. And then it'll just live there. And so just asking, like, okay, he said, oh, I'll go ahead and put away the clothes as part of the chores that he'll pick up and everything, because I always did the laundry, and so he's been doing that. It's like, okay, sure. And that lasted for like a week, and then things were just like in random places that made no sense and doesn't. So it's just like, okay, and then it slowly petered off to like, and it's in the dryer again. Like, okay, how about this? I'll pick up the putting away the clothes, folding and putting away the clothes. All right, and then you can do everything else. Just get it ready. Just don't leave it in the dryer. Just put it in a hamper and like leave it on the bed so I know that it's been done, and I'll take care of it. So
Okay.
that sort of thing was like, okay, well, it's not the end of the world, and it's not a big deal. And this way, I also know exactly where everything is too. So there's that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that what I'm getting from what you're saying is that he's still in training. That like he is improving in terms of like, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. Like he is improving in that regard. It's just that because he's still in training, you can't trust him yet with the really, really important stuff. So if there's like a very important bill that needs to get paid, that's not the thing that you're gonna like work on that with him with. Like you're gonna say like, okay, like try out doing the laundry, see how that goes for you. And then if it doesn't go well, it's like, okay, the clothes are a little wrinkled, like I can handle that. Versus like having a black mark on my credit for like 7 years.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that. Yeah. That I think that's a good way to say it. Um. Yeah. And I think the other thing that too to stay positive is again, it is the mental load, so to speak. Well, not so to speak. That's pretty much exactly what it is. That I still have to think about it. But if there is something that I do need help on, um, outside of the little acts of kindness, acts of service, if whatever of a project, a home project or what have you, like will you be able to help me with XYZ? Okay, that's no problem. As soon as he's to finish what he's doing, or if it's possible to even drop what he's doing, okay. So I mean that also is a good help.
yeah, for sure. Um, hmm, okay. Uh, so as we're coming up on about an hour here, so I just want to check in with you. Is there anything that uh that stood out to you in this conversation that you'd like to ask me about, that you'd like to talk a little bit more about? Any like last minute things that, and it doesn't have to be a minute, like we can talk for as long as we want, but any things that you want to hash out a little bit more, ask me about, I don't know.
If I wasn't in a mental fog, I might be able to reply with something
I
that would be a little
getcha.
bit more substantive, but at the moment, I can't think of anything.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
I totally
I mean,
getcha.
yeah, and I mean, let's see, how long was that? So that was 5 hours of talking yesterday that my friend and I did.
Hmm.
So obviously, I have no problem talking or just like discussing and that sort of thing, and going down where all these different paths. So I have no problems talking, but so I can't think of anything specific.
Okay.
Unless there's anything that pops out to you that was seemed um, uh, important or had some appeared to have some form of significance that should be reviewed again or anything like that.
I think that there's a lot of stuff that you talked about that is really cool in terms of sort of just like examining like relationship dynamics. So I think that one of the main themes that I heard from what you talked about today is this idea of sort of bearing with your partner as they work on something. That, like, relationships don't need to be this like perfect puzzle piece match. Every relationship is going to have, like pieces that don't quite fit together, don't fit together quite right. But as long as you see sort of like progress in those areas, it's okay to sort of like bear with them through that, as long as you will also take steps to make sure that like you're also getting your emotional needs met. um and then I think that the sort of continuing off of that, the other thing that stood out to me is that um well, let me ask you about this real quick, because I'm sort of curious what your perspective on it is.
Okay.
um in terms of all kinds of relationships, so friendships, family, romantic relationships, what is your like relationship hierarchy look like? Does that make sense?
I don't think I understand. Or you mean like where do I place like my spouse and my friends and my family and that sort of thing?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. In terms of, so to give you an example to sort of illustrate this, I think that for a lot of um, I'll just say for a lot of people, I think that their significant other is at the top of that hierarchy, like the most important person, period. And then everyone else, however that hierarchy is arranged, is sort of below that. And so it's like always prioritize this person, and then, there are like things beneath that. And I'm curious how your relationship hierarchy is laid out. Does that question make sense?
yeah, I can see that. And the answer to that one is it's pretty it's the same in terms of my husband is at the top of the hierarchy.
Hmm.
Um, it, I mean, besides the fact that you know married to him, it's also somebody that I fully intend to grow old and die with. So they're here for the long haul. So to be is like to prioritize them, um, and I mean even like when I stream or if I'm in meetings. Like what was I remember I interrupted a meeting with the with the executive vice dean, my direct boss, of like, hold on, my spouse is texting me. So like, let me just make sure, like, are we good? Like, okay, oh, this is something for, okay, I can look at it later. So okay, yes, what was it? So it's like I have no problem stopping whatever it is that I'm doing just to make sure, like, okay, we're good. Anything? Everything okay? All right, so we're good. Or if it's unless I'm again doing something really busy, and then I can put it off to the side until I can get back to it, or at the very least acknowledge it. From there, um, then I've got my parents, then our pups, and then starts my friends. Um, yeah, and so I think it's especially since my parents live with us for part time when they're not exploring wherever they want to go in their retirement. But yeah. So spouse, parents, pups, friends.
Okay. And so then I think that what I'm curious about in that is uh, sort of a question about emotional intimacy, because
Mm-hmm.
it seems like in some ways there is almost like more, I don't know if it's more or if it's just easier to access, but some difference in emotional intimacy between your friends and your husband. And I'm curious how that affects the hierarchy, if at all. Does that question make sense?
Makes sense. Um, but I think it doesn't seem to impact the hierarchy in more than one way. Excuse me, it does not impact the hierarchy at all because I still do talk to my husband if something's bothering me, and you know, yes, there are positives and negatives from that one versus friends, um, but it's just kind of like it's because I want my spouse to know how I feel and not if there's anything they can do about it, but it at least feels like I still feel that the feelings are being at least acknowledged. And which again, like I said at the beginning, the biggest pet peeve of mine is feeling dismissed. Um, so at least in that regards, that is being met. And yes, it is sometimes easier to talk to a friend. Well, I guess it's also easier to say like one thing should be abundantly clear by now is that I tend to not do things the easy way. So I'd rather just go through and talk to my spouse about something and then have my friends that yes, if I really hit that point like yesterday where I needed to and I feel like my spouse would have been there, it just kind of worked out that because like the first friend meetup and everything was planned on I think it was Thursday, so it just kind of worked out. And then the one in the evening just normally I would be like, well, I'm going to bed. Because like what texted me is like I would be getting out of the bath and I'm probably like, just gonna like lay down and go to bed. But it worked out better that way. So, but otherwise, I normally talk to husband and then play video games, talk with friends online or via text message, possibly meet up and go from there.
And just a quick clarification. What was it that prompted you to go to did your friend reach out to you or did you reach out to them about going over and having whiskey?
Oh, he actually reached out to me. He said, "Oh, hey, I haven't spoken to you in a while," and just kind of went from there and just catching up via text message. And so it just literally it just worked out, which is good. But
Okay. So the reason that I asked about any of this, because I realize it might seem a little tangential, but the reason that I asked about any of this is because one of the things that I was, uh, what's the right word? One of the things that I thought was valuable about what you said was this idea that all of your needs don't have to be met by your partner, which is why I asked about the hierarchy, because I think that that is a common view that a lot of people hold. That it's like, if my partner isn't meeting all of my needs, then it's a problem. And what I heard you describe is that sometimes my friends meet my needs. And I think that that's a really valuable idea. And I think that what I got in clarifying with you is that that's true, except that it's usually not prompted on your end because as you said, like, you like to go about things the hard way. So like you'll like bash your head against the brick wall for a little while, and then one of your friends will be like, "Hey, do you want to come over here?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I guess I could go over
yeah,
there and talk to my friend."
yeah, that absolutely is true. Uh, I and yeah, I mean, I absolutely I know I completely acknowledge and agree that an individual if you're a couple your partner is not responsible for your happiness. You have to find that internally, and at the same time, you can't always rely on them. Um, eh, and so I know maybe a better. I feel like it's almost like I'm trying to walk back a statement to make it lined better with what you were saying. But if I think about it honestly, I will often not to my mom and dad. I will often go to my mom to discuss things and that sort of thing. But just because of the nature of the relationship in terms of, he is my spouse, you are my mother, and we live in the same house, I still try to maintain, like, if there's an issue or something that I needed to vent about, we'll never go to my mother for that, because I don't want to even approach that area or anything like that, just more because I know my mom is also very good and very cognizant of, like, don't be overbearing mother-in-law sort of thing, which is very nice. Um, let's see, because I even remember times where my husband and mother, I would get home late from grad school, and they'd be like half a bottle of wine in, so just talking like, all right. But that's at least said that. But after that, then I do feel that I go reach out to friends, but I also feel like instead of reaching out to friends for the emotional needs, it's like it is more of an afterthought, or it can be an afterthought, and I think it will be either talk to a husband, or it can be an and/or doing something in a creative space to make me feel to de-stress that way. Which, even if I discuss it, like, I still will often still need time just to decompress on my own. So as soon as we're done here, I got a couple more things I got to do with, for adulting, and then I'm probably gonna play a video game for like 3 hours.
Yeah,
Good
for
way to
sure.
de-stress.
And just to clarify, I hope that it didn't come across in what I said that I was saying that I thought you were like making your partner responsible for your happiness. Um,
Oh,
that is definitely not what I was trying to imply. So I'm sorry if I communicated it that way. More what I meant is that I think that the reason that we get into relationships is to like get certain needs met. Like otherwise, like we wouldn't need to get into relationships. We would just be happy single people. And I think that a lot of times when people get into relationships, all of those needs, all of the needs of like relationships in general, get placed on one person. And I'm not saying that that's the case with you necessarily. In fact, the opposite. Because one of the things that I thought that you said that was really valuable was this idea that you do go to friends or other people to like help emotionally decompress, because you know that that is sort of a harder ask for your husband. And like you'll go to your husband too and like work through the stuff that needs to be worked through. But that there are also other resources that you utilize when, maybe you don't have the emotional bandwidth, or, whatever the case. You'll utilize those other resources. Does that clarify things a little bit?
absolutely. And I think I just to follow up on that one is, and clarify my own end, I did not take it as you saying that say a partner is responsible for your happiness and that sort of thing. It was legitimately more of a uh, probably that I was thinking it might be on the same line of thought, and it could also just be me being overly tired and thinking that that's what you were, or not that you said that, but it was just probably something that my mind pulled together in terms of like, well, this is kind of a similar thought process.
Sure.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Just sort of another idea of like your partner cannot be wholly responsible for your happiness.
yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I had a great time talking to you. Thanks for chatting.
Absolutely. Thank you.